By focusing their attention on an individual problem or opportunity, the team can be much more likely to experience success. The team I mentioned before did exactly that. They selected the problems they could solve and did. One team I worked with was chartered with a nearly overwhelming issue. Their company was spending $27 million more per year than was budgeted. Almost all of the overrun was attributable to two routine occurrences. The first was that even though the winning vendor appeared to have the lowest cost, problems would seemingly always occur. These problems would result in a premium charge to correct them. Due to the long lead times required to build these tools, it was always too late to switch to another vendor. These premium charges were often more than the original cost of the entire tool. The second major component of that overrun was the tremendous amount of rework the internal tool-building shop had to invest in making these vendor-provided tools right when they came into the shop. The specific problem out of the 70-plus individual problems this team identified they chose to work on was the quality of information they sent out with the request for quotes. The team determined that the information being sent out was so lacking in detail that the vendors did not have to include all of the different cost components that would contribute to the final price of the tool. The vendors were free to exploit that by quoting a price that was far lower than what they knew the final price would be. Because the lead times were so long, it was not in the financial interest of the vendor to solicit the additional information until they had the leverage to add the cost for those additional characteristics as the aforementioned premium change charges. The team recognized it had control over that problem. The RFQs were compiled within the company. They obviously had a major impact on the issue of the $27 million annual budget overrun for vendor tooling. It was a problem that had a major impact on their quality of work life. The internal tool building shop was losing contract after contract to low bids from external tool shops. Not only did that threaten their employment security, but they often had to rework outside vendor tools that fell far short of the functionality needed to support the production line it was intended for. When a team is able to choose an achievable problem that has the characteristics of being a significant contributor to the problem, within the control of the team, and a major threat to their job security or quality of work life, they cannot fail to be successful. This team was no exception. Their actual return for focusing this problem exceeded the original target of $27 million. Related benefits included that by clarifying the company's needs more exactly, bids, both internal and external, were more easily compared. The internal shop, which had always included the total cost of the tools in their bids, were able to compete on a more level playing field and win more bids. An opposite situation occurred in a team of purchasing department agents. By not considering the issue of control, they chose a problem that could not be solved. They had identified that much of their time was spent filling out the technical specifications for materials they were ordering. This information was supposed to be filled out by the engineers in another department. When they approached the supervisor of this other department, he asked a few questions before he would respond to their request. How long had the purchasing people been doing this? How many times had their information turned out to be inaccurate? When the team responded that in 5 years they had never had a single order rejected because of inaccurate technical specifications, the supervisor had 2 responses. Keep up the good work, and I'm down 25% below my authorized manpower and can no longer be responsible for providing that information. Appropriate structure is critical to the early survival of teams. There are identified, viable processes for every basic team type intervention. There are standard team tools that make these standard processes work. Standard team tools including brainstorming, criteria rating, nominal group technique, data gathering, fishbone charts, force field analysis, action planning, and plan analysis. The use of consensus-building team tools helps the team to invest their creative energies and entrepreneurialism in ways that help the team to achieve their objectives and goals. The strict use of these tools is an inevitable part of communicating as a team versus communicating with another individual. The dynamics are that different. Teams in the forming and particularly in the storming stages of team development are especially needing of structure in process and communication protocols. The more subtle and potentially explosive issues of divergent goals, territory, personality differences, organizational conflict, political alliances, and role clarification are challenging enough for a team to handle without having to negotiate every element of their operating simultaneously. Dr. Crescencio Torres, in a previous ITC video conference on the Tao of team building, stated that one of the basic principles for team building success is to practice the least complex things in life. Not reinventing team process and tool usage for each new team simplifies their task. It provides them the psychological and social breathing room to focus on areas where their individuality is more productive. Team building is a defined process. Process integrity is what separates the occasionally brilliant from the consistently brilliant team. Process integrity is a commitment to use viable processes strictly until tangible evidence makes it clear that focused changes are needed. Genuinely consensual decision-making likewise relies on tools that improve the speed and quality of decision-making in a team environment while minimizing inequality, aggressiveness, and non-assertiveness. A team in a shipping department of a large manufacturing firm that had been successful in resolving a number of million-dollar-per-year problems started to suffer from the fruits of their labors. 3 of their old members had been promoted, leaving only 5 remaining members. They were very concerned about getting the right type of replacements. They resolved this problem by developing 5 different selection criteria, including innovative, attendance, technical expertise, process-oriented, cooperation. They brainstormed a list of 12 possible persons to add to the team. They then rated each candidate according to each of the criteria using a 3-point rating scale. A 3 equaled role model, 2 fully satisfactory, 1 not a visible strength. They approached only the 4 highest rated candidates about consenting to join the team. 1 declined and the other 3 accepted. A large consideration in their acceptance was that because criteria were used, they felt it was more of an honor to be selected. In any situation, by identifying appropriate selection or decision-making criteria, using a 3 or preferably 5-point rating scale, teams can reach a true consensus on each of the most important decisions they have to make. These decision-making criteria can include control, impact, speed, quality of work life, and cost. Urgency gets you speed. Speed is not only unifying, it is also the deadliest competitive advantage. Speed generally equates to efficiency and productivity, low scrap and high quality, and schedule reliability. Putting increasingly more challenging time standards on activities where it is appropriate creates an incentive to get the job done and get it done well. Mistakes, waste, and delays are the enemies of speed. A key prerequisite of speed is a planned versus a canned approach, a viable known process. Chrysler Motors has adopted speed as a preeminent strategy for success. Teams should put a clock on everything they do. Peter Drucker, author of The Effective Executive, was absolutely right when he said, "What you can't measure, you cannot manage." When teams know they are being timed on their projects, their progress speeds up dramatically. By adding speed in the performance rating of their total quality leadership steps, teams with the United States Navy have shortened their average cycle time from 13 plus months to less than 3. Each completed step is logged on the date of its completion. In addition to major increases in speed, there was a tremendous improvement in process integrity. By measuring the completion date for each step, rather than just the last step, the emphasis on process integrity is maintained. As we have learned, process integrity helps to guarantee success. Many people characterize the typical behavior of many teams as confrontational, ineffective, and time-consuming. They lack focus on the proper things if they focus on anything at all. One team I joined long after they were originally formed made the desperate request that I keep them focused and not inflame the animosities between supervision and the employees. In the absence of good process, all they had to do was complain about overall conditions and get frustrated at their boss's perceived lack of concern. Too many teams fall into that category, disorganized and disillusioned. They never get out of the storming stage. The team in question went on to become one of the most productive in the history of the company. 5 out of the 6 core members were promoted from their blue-collar jobs into either supervision or white-collar production support jobs in either purchasing or manufacturing engineering. Their fame in consistently improving performance made their membership a coveted commodity. They were able to import what they had learned about the need for process integrity into the situations they were promoted into. One of the lessons we have learned from total quality management is that good process is the key to consistently effective performance. With team building, it also reduces the number of things that groups of people can argue about. A planned approach provides the stable foundation in which growth and creativity can flourish. Perhaps the most important outcome of involving people in team building is that team building grows people at an accelerated rate. Team building inherently enriches all team members with the experience, skills, and commitment of others. It provides the opportunity for all team members to eventually surpass the previous level of performance of the most gifted members. Growing people is the ultimate competitive advantage. Most other business resources can be duplicated fairly easily. The quality and innovativeness of your people is an asset that multiplies all other competitive factors exponentially. It requires the most diligence, the most excellence and complexity, but growing people pays back the most richly. But there is an overriding imperative that makes team building a requirement, not discretionary. That is the extended process. People and work groups do not operate in a vacuum. A team that is not well represented by members of each component of the extended process will not have the perspective, authority, or resources to function effectively. The extended process identifies unmistakable patterns of interdependence among even the most diverse functions in the workplace. Suppliers, process owners, and customers, both internal and external. The structure best suited to deal with this business inevitability is the team. The extended process model not only mandates the use of teams as the primary agent of change and accomplishment in business, but also describes an important characteristic of a team's composition. Incorporating the extended process into the membership of the team radically increases their empowerment level. The extended process model provides the resources to do the most important task necessary for team success. Choose the right problems to work on or improve. Identify the most salient constraints to minimize. Develop the most failure-proof implementation plan. Validate the success of the solution. The proper consideration and incorporation of the 5 powerful unifying factors: direction, achievable goals, appropriate structure, genuinely consensual decision-making, and urgency. These are the keys to effective, long-lasting team building. I look forward to responding to your questions and concerns about the views I've just shared with you. They honestly respect my experience and have consistently contributed to the successful teams I've had the privilege to be affiliated with.
We are now starting our first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. We only ask you to please ask one question per phone call and to be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax which now appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls as at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. First question is coming via fax, and it's coming from Cordoba, Argentina, from the Blaise Pascal University. How can you get people from different organizations to agree on anything within a reasonable time frame?
Ironically, there has been the belief that process strict adherence to process slows down the ability to make decisions. In actual practice, it not only speeds it up, but it also makes it more predictable exactly how long it will take, which is an important element. Paul?
Basically would concur that the timing involved is directly related to the amount of information in terms of examining all the variables in making consensus kinds of decisions.
Muchas gracias. La siguiente es la primera llamada telefónica en nuestra sesión.
And it's coming from Veracruz, Cerro Azul Technological Institute. What would be the important focus point in order to do away with individualistic culture in the formation of work ethics? There was a lot of feedback. I hope this was the question.
I can answer that. I don't know that it necessarily, going to a team approach necessarily requires that you do away with an individualistic or an individualized cultural orientation. In fact, recent research is indicating that having that large variation of individual perceptions, recognizing only that you need to put those together to form an aggregate set of problem-solving teams, makes it in fact, an asset, not a liability. It doesn't necessarily, in other words, have to be a negative towards a team problem-solving approach.
And now we are also sending you a greeting to the association in Medellin, Colombia. Good morning. Federación Nacional de Comerciantes, FENALCO, Antioquia, Medellin, Colombia. The technological development has allowed very important advances and progresses like a virtual office, and the main objective has been to be more efficient and effective in time and productivity management. Time management and productivity. However, this has made man devote more time to his work and less time to himself. How do you explain this nonsense or this contradiction?
Actually, that contradiction does not have to exist to the extent that you might be concerned with. One of the benefits of using a criteria-based selection process is that you can incorporate the humanistic concerns of the individuals in the group and the group as well into the selection of courses of actions or points of focus. As a matter of fact, if you don't incorporate that, eventually you can face burnout. In the variety of alternatives that you might have available, there will certainly be some that give you this balanced approach that satisfy the goals of the business as well as the needs of the human beings in the business.
Worthington?
I would agree that if it is perceived that there are some negative effects in terms of the current technologies, let's say in individualized workspaces with new information technologies and so forth, it's not necessary, if that's becoming an issue, that remain an issue, and that can be controlled for by, again, a teaming approach to address the concerns that may come up where, say, some of a person's independent time or their uniqueness is taken away as a result of this.
And now we're going to Paraguay, thanks to the wonders of telecommunications. This question is coming from the Industrial Union, Paraguay, Asunción. We have a question from the Catholic University. The teamwork could be negatively interpreted considering delegation as lack of authority and consensus as a lack of capacity or ability on the part of who is delegating. And also team building can also be interpreted as lack of clarity in the goals. What can you offer as a solution to counteract these ideas within a working environment?
I can. That's an excellent question. Really the goal behind the teaming process is really the outcomes, either in the context of an educational institution or in the context of a business. If it becomes clear after the initial experimentation phases of the teaming approach are conducted that the outcomes or the desired goals, the specific measurements for improvement, are actually occurring, then everybody's goals are, at least the majority of the goals are then met by those individuals who are involved in the process. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that there is no specific focus or direction within the business. That can be achieved via consensus just as well as it can be achieved in the context of a independent or, let's say, a single manager making those kinds of decisions. And therefore, which is the philosophy of the teaming process, you get buy-in from all of those individuals and then the energy towards the ultimate achievement of the goals.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of the contracts which is implicit in the good functioning of a team in a business context is that management always has the right to choose the issue because of their perspective in what the needs of the corporation are. And that is what they are very competent to do. The team, however, can assist in this process by being the most expert in choosing which of the many facets of any issue they are best equipped and would be in their best interest to resolve. As I mentioned in my presentation, any attempt to solve all aspects of a complex issue with a singular action will probably be met with, at best, no results, and at worst, perhaps negative results. A basic principle of business is management has the right to manage. This is one way to manage that contract.
Saludamos ahora a la Universidad de Guadalajara.
And now we are going to Guadalajara, and this is in Puerto Vallarta, Jalisco, University of Guadalajara. Good morning. A greeting from Jalisco. When the participants of the members of a team come from different cultures and from different cultural levels that are very contrasting, as a matter of fact, even when within the same country, what proceedings, what methods do you recommend?
That's another good question. And the approach on that is to use that, again, as a perceived asset, not necessarily a liability. What we know from the human learning standpoint is the more information that you have in any key business decision or any problem that's having to be solved by a business, the better or the more variables you have at your disposal in terms of solving whatever those problems are. So having a large variation of views, notwithstanding those views are from different cultural perspectives, can actually be perceived by the participants and by then the managers, and then if the process is understood that those are valuable, they can be used to make the right kinds of decisions.
Question is coming from the National Institute of Training, coming from Peru, Lima, Peru. Good morning, we're calling from Peru, Telecommunications Training Institute, and these are our questions. We have two concerns. One of those is what to do with supervision that doesn't go at the same pace of the teams that work on a consensus basis. And the other one is when we're trying to reach a consensual interaction, what is first, the motivation of the team or the self-motivation of the worker, of the employee?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. To the second question, basically, you cannot really separate the motivation of the individual worker from the motivation of the team. One of the roles, valuable roles of the members of the team is to represent the concerns of the individual workers in general. That is how they enrich the perspective and are effective in producing more of a win-win resolution to the issues assigned to them.
Bien, de Perú viajamos ahora a Panamá. La siguiente pregunta es formulada por la Universidad Tecnológica de
The Technological University of Panama. The question is as follows. In state enterprises, the teamwork is very often affected by bureaucracy that is in place. What do you recommend us to do?
That's always a tough situation. If you're working within the constructs of a very large organization, clearly if the bureaucracy is impeding the approach that problem-solving teams would take, then the communication between those bureaucratic elements and the teams is going to have to be very clear in terms of sharing of objectives. If you can find the common objectives and then communicate to those within the bureaucratic circles what the impediments or the difficulties are, that's going to be your best approach in terms of letting them know that they're actually restricting the solution to some of these problems.
And speaking pragmatically and realistically, very often what the team might resort to having to do is to identify what are the areas that are not defined or constrained by the bureaucracy where they can produce a worthwhile result and focus their efforts in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Now we are going to Bolivia, back to South America, and this is a university, private university in Bolivia. Good morning. We are calling from Cochabamba, Bolivia, and this is our question. In team building, will you please explain to us the process of delegating responsibilities and objectives or goals for each one of the members of the team? How do we do this? Assigning.
This is actually done at many levels, and one of the levels of assigning that is perhaps most ignored is the clarification of the roles of the individual members. There is a straightforward three-step process which is very helpful to doing this, and that is to have each individual person state what they would like their role with the team to be. In response to this, the other members of the team respond with their perceptions of how this individual person could best serve the team. The third step then becomes obviously to take into account the individual preferences, the team needs, and, not to overuse the term, reach a consensus as to what ultimately is the best contribution each individual person can make. It is the hallmark of the most effective teams, whether they exist in sports, business, or even in educational institutions, because not all persons will get the opportunity to do all things in the team context.
We are now going to read to you a question coming via fax from Brazil. This is coming from KTV. Can it be that the team is it possible that the team chooses a wrong alternative because of the consensus? Democracy sometimes is not the best way.